Hi, so today we are here to talk about our Including Communities grant programme. So this is our flagship fund that we have run for the last couple of years. So this is our Including Communities 2024 fund. And I am Joanne, our Grants Manager. So the format of today, we've kind of allowed 60 minutes. We might not need all of that, but the aim of the 60 minutes was to give a brief introduction to the work of who we are at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Community Foundation, spend a bit longer looking at the grant criteria for the Including Communities programme. We're going to have a few slides about some hints and tips about filling in the application form, and then we'll leave time at the end for you to ask your questions. So just very briefly, lots of you might be very familiar with who we are, but we are the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Community Foundation. We're one of the UK's 47 community foundations. The key things that you need to know about us are that we are a place-based funder. That means we make grants in Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. We manage lots of different grant programmes from a range of donors. Our key aims within our grant making are to reach grassroots community organisations. We'll talk a little bit about our impact framework later, but our core aim is to tackle poverty and inequality across all the grant making that we do. And to give you an idea of kind of the scale of our grant making in 2023, which was our last kind of full year of grant making, we made grants totaling just under £1.5 million. So again, our team, we're a very small organisation, and the grants team is myself, the grants manager, and Catherine, who's our grants administrator. Both of us are part-time. We don't work Fridays. So if you're trying to get hold of us, Fridays is not a good day to get in touch with the grants team. So do leave us a message and we'll get back to you on Monday. And lots of you will be familiar with Jackie Scott, who's our chief executive, who also gets really involved in lots of our grant making and grant programmes as well. So I mentioned a minute ago that poverty and inequality kind of underpins our grant making. In 2023, we decided that we were going to think about, I guess, looking at the kind of the categories and themes that our grant making covered, and we came up with something called our impact framework. We decided that poverty and inequality was kind of our golden thread that runs through all of our grant making. So when you're applying for any of our grants programme, always consider how your project will reach people, say, living in poverty, facing discrimination, who are isolated. The other themes which sit within our impact framework are these 5. So we've got flourishing communities, employability and skills, health and wellbeing, the environment, and crime and safety. So for every grant programme that you apply to with us, it will be linked to one or more of those themes. So what you need to know if you're applying to our Including Communities programme is that it is linked to flourishing communities, which is that light blue box on the left of your screen. So flourishing communities covers all of our work that connects people to local services and activities and strengthens their communities. So all of the programmes that link to Including Flourishing Communities will be about bringing people together, about strengthening that social fabric, about connecting people with their neighbours and local communities. So that's really important for you to bear in mind when you're applying to us, that your work might also touch on some of those other things. You know, your work might also touch on health and well-being, for example, or it might also give people some skills. But at the heart of an Including Communities application, you should be thinking about, does it meet the Flourishing Communities impact theme? So let's look a little bit more about that Including Communities programme. So the aim of this grant programme, as we said, is to build flourishing and connected communities. I went back to have a look at some of the grants that we made in 2023, because as we said, this is an annual programme. And I thought that I would just pick out now a couple of those kind of live examples of grants that we actually made in 2023, because people often ask us, what makes a successful bid? You know, what sort of things do you fund? So this isn't an exhaustive list, but a couple of examples. So we funded a regular club for older people, providing weekly sessions. It did a games night, had speakers. We funded a weekly support group for parents with babies and toddlers. The group had a focus on people who were new mums, who might be isolated, struggling with their mental health. We funded a weekly supported volunteering group with adults with support needs. So that helped those adults get involved in volunteering activities within their community, like working on a community allotment, doing local litter picks. We funded a social group for the Nepalese community in the local area. We funded a group for social sessions for Black and minoritized women who have experienced or are at risk of domestic abuse. So they would come together to do art, craft, cookery sessions. We funded nature and art weekly sessions in an outdoor classroom for young people. We also funded a weekly lunch club for older people. So as you can see, we have funded a range of demographics, older people, younger people, every age group in between. But the focus of that has been bringing people together within their local community. Let's have a look at some of the kind of the logistics of this fund. So the programme opened on the 19th of August. It's going to close on the 1st of October. So all of our grant programmes close at midnight on the day advertised. So it will close at midnight on the 1st of October. That will be a strict deadline. This is going to be a popular programme, so that will be a cut-off point then. In terms of when you will be notified about funding decisions, we will be assessing applications in kind of October and November. They will go to panel at the end of November. So we will be alerting people about if they have been successful with a grant, probably early December. And then in terms of when you would run your funded activities over, we're really looking then at the funded work covering January 2025 to December 2025. So there is part of the application form when it says, when will your project run? We won't be able to get grant payments out for successful grantees any sooner than just before Christmas. So we're hoping that these will go in one of our final payment runs in December. But because of Christmas being in the way, we will probably expect most organisations to start delivery of their grants kind of January onwards. And because these are 12-month grants, it will run from January 25 to December 25. The grant size that you can apply for, we're suggesting a minimum grant size of £1,000 and a maximum of 10,000. Please don't apply for over 10,000 because, again, this is a limited pot of money and we will be capping grants at 10,000. The geography, as in where you can apply to deliver the project, this covers all of our geographies within our community foundation. So that's Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton, and the Isle of Wight. So for all of our open grant programs that you'll see on our website, they always have what we call program criteria or fund criteria. So that means things that you should kind of boxes that you should be trying to tick that are applicable to that particular fund that you're applying for. And we've got 3 for including communities, and we're going to go through those now. So the first programme criteria for including communities is that you should make really clear in your bid how the project that you're running will reach people who are in poverty, facing discrimination, or isolated. This could be through talking about, for example, the indices of multiple deprivation in your local area. So you could say that actually people are living on really low incomes. It could be that you're working with a particular group which is facing discrimination or is kind of isolated. So it could be that you're working with people from a particular minoritized community, people who have a disability. You could be working with people from the LGBTQ+ community. It's about working with people who, might find it sometimes hard to come together, and there might be barriers in place for them to come together. So what we're wanting you to do in your application is identify who that target community is for us, and give us some understanding of how you're going to reach that community and how you're going to make them feel welcomed and included on that project. The second programme criteria is going back to that idea of flourishing communities. Your application must be for work that brings together members of the community. So we often get asked, what do you mean by bringing people together? We're looking ideally for projects for including communities that are happening on a regular and sustained basis. So something like a youth group or a lunch club really ticks those boxes, because quite often they will be maybe a weekly session that has quite regular attendees. So, you know, if you're a local young person, you know that youth club is on every week. You might be dropping into that youth club every week. That youth club might run for 30 weeks of the year. And, you know, whilst not everyone will attend every session and you might have new people join halfway through, you'll have that kind of core group of people who are building that peer support, those community connections. So what we're really looking for is that sort of model. We're not looking for something which is a one-off event. We're not looking for you to say run 3 sessions 4 months apart. We probably wouldn't see that as regular enough. We're looking for something which, has that regular calendar and ideally a fairly core group of people that you're bringing together. If you've got questions about that, I'm really happy to answer that at the end. But we wouldn't rule out something that's fortnightly. But yeah, it would need to be something that's regular. Quite often things that are youth-based might be term time. So if you just wanted to run stuff in term time, that would be fine. We're probably unlikely to run things that just run in school holidays because, again, that lacks frequency. But if you were running one type of program in term time and another type of program on top of that in holiday time, then that would definitely be something we could consider. The third criteria is that your application should show how local people or people from your target community have kind of helped shape that work. So we completely appreciate that you could be working with babies and toddlers, you could be working with older people with dementia, you might be working with people who are maybe, quite hard to consult with, but you should be showing how you have spoken to people within your local community and aware of that need. So it could be that if you're working with very young children, that you've spoken to parents, you've looked at local data, maybe have you done surveys, have you done opinion polls, have you got suggestion boxes? Have you got people from your local community who sit within your committee or governance of your organisation? It's really useful for us to understand how that work has been requested locally. What we don't want to do, obviously, is to run projects that local people don't have an affinity with. We want those projects to be responsive to local people, led by local people, including local people. So yeah, within your application form, do make sure if you have done any consultation work and indicate to us how you know that there is real local need for the project. So this slide has a quick look at the types of things that we can fund under including communities. So within the application form, you will be given like a budget grid where you can talk about the types of costs that you apply for and the types of things that we will cover with that £1,000 to £10,000 grant. Our staff costs, so we can include full or part-time staff connected to the grant delivery. So it could be that you've already got a full-time worker and you just want to pay for, say, 5 hours of them per week from this. That's fine. Obviously, make sure that you're really clear in your application how many hours you're including for that staff member. And it's really helpful on a budget rather than just putting staff for the project to maybe include their job role. So, is it a project worker? Is it a youth worker? Is it a sessional member of staff? And if you can indicate kind of hourly rate and how many hours we will be paying for them on what basis. So, for example, we'd be paying them 5 hours a week for 30 weeks of the year at £20 an hour. That's really useful for us to understand how you've come up with those figures. We appreciate that quite often staff costs make up quite a large portion of a lot of the grant requests that we have. The other thing that you can claim for is volunteer costs. So if you've got volunteers who are involved in the delivery and help running of your project, you can include that out-of-pocket expenses. So it could be that volunteers are driving or taking a bus to your project to kind of help out, that you need to train those volunteers, that you need to do DBS checks for those volunteers. So all those sorts of project costs can be included within your budget. The third area is what we call activity costs. So these are the costs that are specific to your project. So they will only incur because you're running your project. They're not core costs which are there for your organisation the whole time. So these could include things like, do you need to hire a room for your project? So if we go back to that example of a youth club, do you need to hire the local village hall every week? Do you need to create publicity materials for that youth club so you can put up posters or flyers or have a pop-up banner stand? Do you need refreshments for your group? In some cases, it might be appropriate for you to cover transport costs for people to get to that group. So especially if it might be older people, people with a disability, it could be that you're laying on transport or support to get them to the project. Any consumables that you're using for your project, such as if it's a craft group, craft materials, if it's a youth group, you might want again, you know, small pieces of equipment or items that will be used within those groups. So they can be included in activity costs. Core costs, which is the fourth area, is something that we would like all organisations to kind of consider when they apply. So what we mean by core costs are those costs that would be in place whether you run the project or not. So those could be things like a contribution to your core rent. So if you've got kind of an office space, it could be that you ask for a small portion of this grant to go towards that. Or it could be towards, say, core staff, such as if you've got a chief executive, an administrator, a finance worker. So we know that quite often there can be lots of logistics involved with running a project. And it might be that, you know, you do need a little bit of the finance worker's time to pull together a budget, or you might have an administrator who sends out newsletters or something for the project, or does kind of attendance data for the project. So if you think that you're using core staff, do make sure that you're including that. Lots of people ask, how should we work out core costs? We don't have a set formula that we ask people. So we would expect you to come up with your own clear rationale for what you're asking for. So some organisations would do it, say, on a project basis. So they would say, we're running 5 projects, and therefore we're going to take our core costs and divide that by 5 and try and apportion that to each project. Sometimes you might be able to work out particular hours. So you might say, I think our chief executive might spend an hour a week on this project, so you can budget for that. So as long as you've got a clear rationale as to why you're asking what you are, then we are absolutely happy for you to include some core costs as a proportionate amount. As a rough ballpark, we would probably expect that to be, say, no more than 20% of your overall grant. But that can obviously slightly fluctuate depending on the size of the organisation. So that's a rough guide. The final thing that you could apply for is equipment. We're going to go on to a slide in a minute, which is exclusions. So one of the exclusions is very large pieces of equipment on this. But we will allow smaller pieces of equipment. So we are having a cap on this fund of £1,000 for equipment. But if you're applying for smaller things, like maybe you just need a new printer for the project, or you know, there's a particular piece of kit that you might need for the project, then you can include that there. Again, it's really useful to do just a little bit of research and kind of, yeah, let us know if you've got kind of a quote for that, or where you might be sourcing that piece of equipment from. So this is our list of exclusions, things that we cannot fund under including communities. So we cannot fund work that is carried out on a one-to-one basis under this programme. So that would exclude projects such as counselling. That's because, if you remember, we talked about the Flourishing Communities impact theme. So this funding is about bringing the community together and strengthening those social bonds. So we have other programmes around health and wellbeing that might, for example, cover counselling. So it might be picked up in other areas of our funding, but it wouldn't be picked up under this project. As mentioned before, under the equipment section of the budget, we can fund equipment, but we won't fund individual items of equipment over £1,000. We also won't, under this programme, fund capital cost or refurbishment work. So we won't fund new roofs. We won't fund, you know, an updated kitchen for your community centre. If, for example, you were doing something like a supported volunteering project, where I gave the example earlier that last year we funded a supported volunteering project, which was working with adults with disabilities and bringing them together to do kind of tasks in the community. So if they wanted to paint a fence as part of that, we would obviously be able to do you know, cover things like paint or paintbrushes on it. So refurbishment work is fine if it's part of your community delivery, but it's not fine if it's just refurbishment work. So if you're bringing in tradesmen to just paint your ceiling, that can't be covered with this. We are a place-based funder, and within this very popular fund, we will absolutely give priority to community organisations who are solely based in and delivering work within our key areas, which are Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight. So this means that if, for example, you are a national organisation who just happens to operate, for example, in Portsmouth, you will probably be given less priority than an organisation which is a Portsmouth-based and run organisation. We always have organisations which sit in that grey area where they might both cover work in Portsmouth and another area which sits kind of outside of those localities. So please do come to us if you've got questions about your location, and we can look at that on a case-by-case basis. But the general rule of thumb is that priority will be given to those organisations who can show that they are exclusively based in those areas and are therefore operating on a you know, a very local grassroots basis. Another exclusion is we will not fund one-off or infrequent events. As mentioned, under that programme criteria, this fund is looking for regular events that bring people together. So if you're running a conference or family fun day where you're just having a one-off thing, that won't be covered by this funding. Because these grants go up to £10,000, our final point is just around our aim to give grants that are proportionate to the size of the organisation. So we will fund organisations that are very new and starting out, but we are very unlikely to give them the maximum £10,000 grant. So again, we've brought in a suggestion of we will give a grant that is grants greater than 30% of your annual income. So the example is that if you are a group with an income of £10,000, we would probably cap your grant at £3,000. So it's just to stop a very new organisation which might not have a track record and might not have held grants before applying for the maximum £10,000 grant. If you are a new organisation and you don't have a year's worth of accounts, you can submit your budget for your current year and we can base it on that, but that might be also something that would be useful to phone us about if you're a very new organisation, and we can provide you with some guidance on that. Good. Oh, my page didn't change then. This slide is just a quick overview of how you can find out about our open funding. So all of our open funding, including communities, will be listed on our website. So go to our website and click grants. If you want to find out about when our programs open, because they open throughout the year, you can click the subscribe button on our website and check our social media feeds, because we quite often do run webinars, give out newsletters, etc. about programs that are opening. We also have some frequently asked questions on our website, which are really useful to look at if you are thinking about applying. I'm just going to go very quickly through some of the application process. Including communities uses what we would call our standard application form. So for those of you who have applied to us in 2023 and 2024 in a different fund, you'll probably be really familiar with the application form and the process, because it will be the same form and the same process. But we'll just go through it now because there might be some new information that we can share with you, and some of you might be new first-time applicants. So our application form is online, and one of the ways that we kind of help test if you are an eligible organisation before you start going to that application form is through our eligibility tick box questions. So when you click to apply for Including Communities, you will be taken to this eligibility form, which has got 10 questions on it. They should take you no longer than 5 minutes to just fill this in. It should be information that you know already. And it asks you questions like what type of organisation you are. So you can click if you're a charity, if you're a company limited by guarantee, if you're a KIC, etc. It asks, for example, things like what's your income level. So the cap on this programme is that we're looking for organisations to have an income under $1 million. Do you have a board in place? Do you have a safeguarding policy in place? The next slide looks at the final 5 questions. So it asks things like, do you have an equalities policy? Where will your work be taking place? Will it be taking place in Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight? Will you be delivering for charitable purposes? So the aim of this is to hopefully just flag immediately if there's anything about your organisation or your work which seems like it won't fit with our eligibility. And what happens is if you click an answer which seems like it might be ineligible, you'll get a red box around your answer and a little error flag will come up. So this slide shows, for example, that if you say that you're a school, under what organisation you are, it will flag up a message saying we can't fund work that is a statutory responsibility, and that you should speak to us before applying. So we hope that this will be a useful way for you to hopefully not waste time making an application form if you're not eligible in the first place. And it will be a useful way to kind of open up questions with us if there are things about your eligibility that you want to check. So you'll need to go through this eligibility form in order to access the application form. Once you've got to the end of the eligibility form, it takes you through to a full list of all of our open programmes. Now, we do have some programmes open at the moment which are for individual care leavers, and because these were put onto the website first, they're actually listed first. So you will have to scroll through a list of our current open funding opportunities. So I think Including Communities is probably about 3rd on that list at the moment. So do make sure that you scroll all the way through until you see Including Communities. Once you get to the Including Communities, obviously click that that's the one you want to apply and you'll be taken to the application form. I'm not going to go through every question on the application form. We do have, I'm going to reference it in a minute, but we do have a guidance document that I can signpost you to that does take you through every question. I'm just going to go through a couple of the key questions now. So as part of the application form, the second kind of half of the application will look at what project you are applying for, i.e. what's your Including Communities project. And this is really, really key to help us make a decision about which projects we take forward. And quite often we do see people not always fully answering the question or telling us what we want. So we're just going to go through some of those key project questions now. So one of the questions is, in your own words, how would you describe the target group that your work is seeking to reach? And under all of the questions in the application form, there will be the smaller blue text which says, for example, are you going to be working with a target group of people such as young carers? If the work is with the general community, tell us who you will support. For example, we will support all young people living in a particular village. This is really, really important that you make that clear. We know lots of the organisations that apply to us, but we don't know all of your work inside out. So make sure that you're really clear in that box who that target community is. Are you working with older people? Are you working with young people? Are you working with new mums? Are you working with a particular minoritised community? Are you working with people at risk of homelessness? Make sure that you're telling us in that box who that demographic is that you're working with, because that really helps us understand the nature of your work. Another question on that page is, what is the activity that you will be delivering? And again, the small blue text at the bottom says, for example, are you running a youth group, counselling sessions, training programme, etc. So we've already said that for Including Communities, counselling sessions can't be covered but this is our general application form, so it obviously gives examples relevant to all of our open programs. So what we're wanting to hear within this box is what your Including Communities activity is. So if you are running that lunch club that will bring older people together, make sure that you tell us what that is. We will be running a weekly lunch club. You know, this takes place every week in the village hall. We've got a lovely space connected to a kitchen and toilets. It's accessible. It can fit 20 people. We'll run food, we'll run entertainment, you know, paint a picture a little bit of what that lunch club looks like, just so that we can understand what it is that you're running. These next two questions, make sure that you are definitely telling us, again, some key logistics about it. So the top one is, where will your project take place? So again, it's really useful for you to tell us, is this going to take, you know, is this an outreach project which is going to take place on the streets? Is it going to take place in your local village hall? Is it going to take place with partner organisations? You know, maybe you're going along to another group and running sessions for them. Who will deliver the activity is the second one. So again, it's useful for us to know, have you got a dedicated project worker? Will this be a team of volunteers who are delivering it? Will you have to bring in some sessional staff to help? Is it just going to be one project worker, or do you have a team of project workers? All these things are really useful to just help paint a picture for us of what the project is that you're delivering. I mentioned application form guidance. So when you go through on our website to click the Including Communities button, you will be given obviously some criteria about including communities, and right at the top of the page you will see two hyperlinks, which are those two blue lines. So the first one is our grant agreement, which is I guess kind of the terms of reference for you applying and holding the grant. And the second one is called our application form guidance. So as I said, those are hyperlinks. So if you click on that, it will take you through to a document that lists all of the questions in our application form and gives guidance and hints and tips. This application form guidance is really useful because when you're filling in the application form, you can only progress to the next page once you've completed the following page. So in order for you to plan the application form in advance and maybe preempt what questions you're going to be asked, access that application form guidance, and then you will be able to see in one document all of the questions that we're asking. The version which is on our website is a PDF, I think, but we have got a Word version of that document that if you're interested in having a Word version, you can email us and we can send that to you. And then that's a really useful template for people to input kind of draft answers. The only caveat with using that is that the application form is word counted. So if you are drafting things outside the application form, obviously just make sure that you are looking at the word counts. That application form guidance does state all of those, so just bear that in mind. Part of the application form, so right at the end of it, you will be asked to upload some supporting documents. So they're uploaded directly into your application form. You don't need to email them to us. And the things that we ask for are your latest set of financial accounts. So that will be the accounts for your financial year that have been signed off. We appreciate that sometimes those are slightly retrospective and out of date because obviously you're always working a year behind with signing those off. If you've got questions about what accounts to provide or what we need, do obviously drop us a line. But yeah, the standard principle is that it's your last full set of signed off accounts. We would like a copy of your governing document. If you're a charity or a CIO or a KIC, we can obviously look you up on Companies House or the Charity Commission. But that is really, really key if you're a constituted community organisation, because we obviously can't check your governance records online for that. So do absolutely make sure that if you're not signed up to Companies House or Charity Commission, that is a key document that we definitely will be checking. Every application should send a copy of their safeguarding policy and their equalities policy. We are expecting these policies to be locally adopted, so i.e. they belong to your organisation. They should show when they were signed off, and they should have regular updates to them. As a rule of thumb, we would consider a safeguarding or equalities policy which is older than 3 years to be out of date. So we would like to see that there is a methodology in place for you to be updating those policies on, say, a 3-yearly cycle. It's quite important for you to provide us a bank statement that shows that you do have an active bank account that the funding could be paid into. That bank statement should show clearly the name of the organisation applying. We're not checking to see how much money you've got. We're not checking to see what you're spending it on, so you can blank that out. What we're checking is that you do have a bank account and it's in your organisation's name. So make sure that's really clear for us. And the final thing that we ask for is a list of people involved in the governance of your organisation. So if you're a charity, that will be your trustees. If you're a company limited by guarantee, that will be your directors. And if you're a constituted community group, that will be your committee members. So we are looking for organisations to have a minimum of 3 non-related people involved in the governance of your organisation. Again, if you've got questions about that, do let us know, but that's the principle we're looking for. These supporting documents do form a core part of your application. If we feel, for example, that your safeguarding policy is very out of date and weak, that could be enough that you don't progress to assessment stage. So do make sure that you're updating current versions of those. And if you've got questions about what to upload, if you're not sure about those documents, do drop us a line, because, as I said, they're a core part of your application form and we will look at them. This is just a general reminder that when you're writing your application form, you need to remember that, you know, some of we will have come out and visited, we might have given you previous grants before, but you need to pretend almost that you're speaking to an audience that knows nothing about your work. So you need to tell us about your organisation and your funding idea. You need to tell us in the application form about your previous amazing work. Don't presume that we know the village that your project is running in. Don't presume that we know the needs of your target group. So make sure that you make that really, really clear. Don't think they'll know that, you know, this particular village has these needs, or this particular community will have these needs. Make sure it's clearly stated. These are some kind of just top line ways of contacting us. So we've got a phone number, a website. The best email to get us on is our grants admin email, and you can also find us on social media in terms of kind of reminders about closing dates, updates about webinars, etc. So do stay in touch with us. We hope you found this presentation useful today, and do share this video with colleagues or partner organisations who you might think are useful. Do you want to stop recording now, Kat?